And it looks like we are live, folks. Welcome to the monthly podcast for St. Pete Timebank. My name is BJ Andryusky, and I'm the founder of St. Pete Timebank and your host for this evening. And my featured guest today, filling in for us in a hot second, because we had some situations beyond our control and lost our guest, is Rita Cobbs from Tampa Bay Timebank. Rita, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Welcome to our show. I'll let you folks know that this is the first time that I have actually done a live broadcast. So hopefully it's going where it needs to go. If any of you all are out there, and we'll put a like on the Facebook or the YouTube so that we can see that we really have done this right, it would be great. So part of the reason that I wanted Rita to come on was I have known Rita for at least 6 years, if not 7 or more. And I was trying to remember where we met. I thought it was at Tampa Bay Timebank, but Rita, you said you thought it was at Sacred Grounds. Do you remember any specifics about that?
Sacred Grounds was where the Timebank used to have their gatherings.
Gotcha.
It was a coffee shop in Tampa that catered to a wide variety of community groups. There were people who loved cats and rescued cats, and there were people who came to play games, and there were an enormous quantity of musicians who would come and play their original music. They weren't allowed to play other people's music, but if they had their own music, they could come and perform. So our founder, Marie Nelson, found it to be a very agreeable setting for us to hang out, and we had regular gatherings there. Then that was where I became acquainted with time banking.
So that's where you became acquainted with time banking too. So how did you hear about it in the first place?
So that's interesting. At one point, my husband and I had a school in St. Petersburg. It was called the Academy for the Gifted. One of our students said that it was the Academy for the Pseudo-Gifted, but that just showed their brightness. But one of our students, Kelly Curtis, was part of the originating group of time banking, and I ran into her when I was working in Borders Bookstore in Tampa.
Wow.
And there we greeted each other like old friends, and she said, "You must come and join us in the time bank." So I did, and inch by inch and meeting by meeting and dialogue by dialogue with Marie, who always had a great deal to say about time banking.
Always. Always. Yeah, she was the pioneer. She was a pioneer in time banking here in this area, like Edgar has been all over the country and all over the world. Edgar Kahn, for those of you who don't know. But yeah, she really was the pioneer here in spreading it far and wide. So you've been a member of Tampa Bay Timebank for how many years?
Well, I'm going to say 8.
8 years. Okay. What intrigued you the most about time banking when you heard about the concept?
It just seemed interesting. So I didn't make a profound decision. It wasn't like I had to weigh the pros and cons. It was like, okay, I'll join. Let's see what this is all about. And what I couldn't understand was why it took them so long to ask me to join. It was like, we're sitting here talking. We've been doing this several times now. Why in the world aren't you saying, okay, here's how you join the time bank? So finally I just said, well, how do I join this thing?
Oh my goodness. That's kind of prophetic, huh? How often are we involved with different things and invite people along for the ride and never go, knock, 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 you want to join us?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's funny. So what would you say for all of those years, what would you say has been different from maybe what you thought it was? Or has it been what you thought it was?
It's not like anything I've ever encountered. Even if you read about it and you see videos about time banks, it's different than any of that, because at least this time bank is organic, and it draws people who are individualistic. You don't find a whole lot of conformists in the time bank. I don't know too many people in the time bank who like to get orders. They tend to be sort of independent in their
Right.
direction.
A little bit
So some
rebellious,
people
maybe. Huh?
say that you can't herd cats, and it's a little bit like that. So it has this, at least Tampa Bay has this kind of organic growth and development, which depends on the energy of the members and what they want to do next. But while they're figuring that out, and while they move in different directions, they get to know each other very well and become close friends. And so the extras seem to come out of the friendships even more than out of a need for dollar value for an exchange. I'm not sure that's typical, but that's where we are.
Well, I know with my own experience, of course, being in Tampa Bay Timebank, I was adamant about that organic growth, because that is something that Marie knows. I came in type A personality, want to get it done, bang, 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 running like a racehorse that was being held back. And Marie Nelson was always like, just take a breath. It'll come organically. And she would always say to me that the Time Bank, Tampa Bay Time, was based on permaculture principles.
Right.
And of course, I was like, what does that mean? you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, can you expound on that a little bit, or what that has meant to you during your time as a leader in Tampa Bay Time Bank?
Sure. So permaculture is not just about growing things. And one of our members that I'm probably closest to, me, is really quite good at growing things. And she actually calls herself Composting Christina because of
Yes.
uh, her decades of love of the garden and working in the garden. But she cautions, don't just think of permaculture as designing your backyard to grow vegetables. It applies to finance, it applies to social structure. And I, I don't know about that to be much of an authority, but I know that one of the principles, you look at what's happening and you build on what something's called stacking, with the idea that a function can have more than one uh, relationship, or that an act can have more than one function. And so I sort of use those principles in an amateurish way, but in the time bank, there are people who really understand it much, much better. There's somebody named Corrine, who is an expert in permaculture, and she
Yes.
teaches classes in it. And she has a farm up in Hernando County, and she uses it as the basis for running the farm. But she also has an online presence and works with groups of people in mutual aid societies and in other ways to carry those principles forward. And there are many others. There's somebody that Laura, I believe is her name,
Mm-hmm.
who runs a Zoom every now and then on financial permaculture.
Yes. Yep. Laura Oldaney. She's got a blog and talks an awful lot about permaculture principles and what was I going to say? So for me, when I heard Marie say that, and I had no clue what she meant, because I had no clue what permaculture means. And then I just watched, actually, when you mentioned Corrine, I watched the video that they just made for her. I'm not sure what organization made it, but it was absolutely wonderful. And she says, like, permanent agriculture, like things that are happening around us. And I like the fact that we can take that into our own daily lives. And it was very often for me making me slow down, because the type A personality, want to get it done, go, 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 coming from corporate America. And it's like, if it doesn't happen organically, it's probably not going to be around very long, permanent, so it's just kind of cool. Now that I've had some experience with it, it's something that's more fun. So, and fun is something that I always like to refer to, because the late Dr. Nelson would always say, if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. All the time, all the time. And so, tell me, if you will, what your most fun thing. It doesn't have to be the most fun, but what's one of the really fun things for you about time banking?
So today, I mean, is an interesting example of how it works, and they're mild funds, nothing that I'm euphoric about, but really neat. Uh, Robert McGinnis is part of our leadership team, and he lives in Lutz, and he has used Corrine's principles and also the U.S. Agricultural Extension Services to create a backyard that is a food forest. And he got out of the house today on his motorcycle. His wife, Debbie, probably didn't think much of that idea, but he got his helmet on. Off he went with vegetables from his garden, and he stopped by the house and brought me an eggplant and arugula.
Nice.
Well, it was nice. Now, I haven't eaten and star fruit to boot. I haven't eaten the eggplant yet, but I've had one star fruit, and I ate all of the arugula today. And that's really interesting because I've never tasted it before. I not only have never eaten it or bought it in the store, I didn't know you could grow it. So I've ordered now from Amazon a little packet of arugula seeds, and we'll see. Maybe window box, maybe front yard. We'll see what happens with it.
And all of this because of a time bank relationship.
Right, exactly. Now, I will give him time bank credits for that. He didn't do it so he'd get a time bank credit, but it represents the time bank credit to me. It was really neat. And then a little later on in the day, Mary Bright, who has her therapy practice here in town and who has a lovely home and is a great believer in exercise, came by to walk my dog. So my dog is Lacey. Lacey was working on a chewy toy with a squeaker a little while ago, but I got that away from her.
When we were testing sound.
I think she's out of sight. She's over there on the couch. But a time bank dog. I'm old enough so I have somebody who comes to help me twice a week with house cleaning and other things. And I go get her. She doesn't have transportation. So she's not far, a mile away. And I bring her back to the house. One day, the people next to her were gone. The house was vacant next to her.
Wow.
And there was this really pretty yellow-red dog on the porch. Well, I'm dogless because my little rat here died about 4 months ago. And I had planned to get a little dog. Lacey's not all that little. Lacey's
not so little.
But you can't resist the plight of an abandoned dog. It was just really so sad. So another person in our time bank, the one who had been our student years ago, Kelly, runs a dog rescue, among other things, Lucky Ones Rescue, and it too is in the time bank. So I called Kelly and said, come and get this dog for me, if you will, and bring it to me at home. And so Kelly went that night to get Lacey, but Lacey was having nothing of it and went under the house and hid.
But her family abandoned her, so she's thinking that the family's coming back to the house.
Yeah, sure, exactly. So one of the things I do for entertainment is watch Hope for Paws YouTube videos. And that's an outfit in LA that rescues dogs. And they have the classiest videos you ever see.
That doesn't tug on your heartstrings all day long?
It's if you want to have peace of mind, watch a video of a unfortunate, miserable dog get rescued and taken back for a bubble bath and fed and cuddled, and then they show how it gets a new home. It's just so heartwarming. So I know the strategy, and the strategy has to do with a cheeseburger, among other things. So the next day I went back armed with 3 cheeseburgers, and I ate one on the way. and when I got there, a neighbor had Kelly's leash on Lacey. So she was caught, and they were parading Lacey around the neighborhood to see if somebody would take her, and nobody would take her. And
Oh,
just to add drama, the family had a lizard that was about 4 feet long. And so the
okay.
little girl was carrying the lizard. So I wasn't interested in the lizard. But yes, Lacey. So the girl said, okay, her name is Lacey. She's a sweet dog. Do you want me to put her in your car? And I said, yes. So that's how I got this big dog. But,
Now,
it's a little hard for
originally,
me to have.
originally you wanted the time bank to help out. You thought maybe there would be somebody from the time bank
Oh,
that could
right,
take the dog,
right,
right? Okay.
right. And originally I'd wanted a small dog, but now it's a big dog. And so the question is, I love this dog. This dog needs me, but can I keep her? And so I asked for help from the time bank. And so Mary is one of those people who comes to help me look after Lacey. And she likes to walk Lacey. She's energetic and she and Lacey love each other. So that's a regular event. And I do
And
give her time bank credit.
that's a practical application of time banking in your life. I mean, how
Yeah.
beautiful is that? Something that because it's not a rat terrier. What is Lacey a particular breed or is she a mutt?
Another time bank member there's an app you can go on your cell phone and call
Okay,
up you can put a picture of your dog and they'll give its genetic makeup. So they did
nice.
that, and it came out that she's 37% Rhodesian Ridgeback, a breed I have
Wow.
never heard of. She does not have
Wow.
a ridge on her back, but she looks like a Rhodesian. But she's
Okay.
got some other stuff like boxer or whatever.
Yeah. Cool. So now you
And
have this
that's
big little dog.
yeah, yeah. So this same person, Tammy, took her when I had to go to Orlando too for 4 days, and Tammy just took her home and fell in love with her. And then after having her for 4 days, she sent me a message and said, uh, "I want to be her godmother."
Oh. So Tammy's her godmother. How
Yes.
sweet. How sweet. So I see a recurring theme here in the different things you talk about with time banking. It's almost like the time bank becomes a family, isn't it?
I think yes. I think that's very much so. Not everybody has a family.
Right.
So sometimes people join the time bank and they don't really have anybody. And we can provide support for people perhaps who have been recently widowed and they're not sure quite who they're going to depend on for companionship and friendship. Um, Sometimes people have just moved into town and they really don't
Mhm.
know anyone yet. Um, I think that the social ramifications are more important than the tangible ones. But I notice, and I guess we've been borrowing what you guys have been doing in St. Pete, which is doing um, material things, stuff,
Goods. Yeah. Goods.
goods,
Hmm.
goods for time bank hours. I like that idea a great deal.
Yeah. Well, I know when Tammy, being an example, we won't say last names. Everybody stays kind of anonymous on YouTube. But when we were emptying out a place and I had a deadline to do it, it's like, Rita, who do you know that can do this? And Tammy came over, had some things that she wanted to purchase from us because we did have some things for sale, and then took everything. So what a blessing it was to have everything gone in one move, and it was worth time credits to me to offer to her to reimburse her for the time that she spent for that. Doing that to get rid of those things, and whatever she did with them, I don't know, and I don't really care. It met a need for me, and I didn't have 3-4 weeks to be able to play with. I want to put this on Marketplace, and I'll put this on eBay, and I just wanted it gone, and that need was served there. So yeah, we found quite a bit. As a matter of fact, during COVID, quite a bit was being done with goods because people were cleaning out closets, and they were safely putting it on their porch. And it's like, we'll leave it on the porch for 3 hours, and you can come pick it up after 5 o'clock or whatever. And so that has been a big part of our exchanging. What would you say, and this might be putting you on the spot, what would you say is your biggest category of exchanges? What happens most in Tampa Bay time?
I think that we have, because of the geographic disparity, we've leaned on Zoom type learning experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So we do every month on the third Tuesday a Zoom with a program, and the program usually has some educational value, sometimes has some social interactive value, but it gives the people a chance to get together all in one Zoom space, and they can share and they can talk. And at a time when COVID is rampant and you can't do that in person anymore, that has taken over as a big way to connect. And so we have a program committee, as it were, that figures out what we're going to do each month, and we try to vary it. And we also try to get input from the membership. What would you like to have us do that we haven't done
Nice.
yet?
Yeah, you've been really successful with that. Most of your third Tuesdays have 20 to 30 members, don't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, one of them may be the gal in Georgia.
Yes.
One of them, as of late, has been a young woman who is in Somerville, which is right next to Boston. So there aren't geographic limits for this.
Right.
And there is a movement within time banking that the gentleman in Ohio started, Tony, for a learning time bank, which I would say that this leans in the direction of, because I think that we can do almost anything with that. We can have time banking Zooms about how to use Zoom, or we can have time banking Zooms about knitting and crocheting, or whatever else we're interested in. And it becomes then a learning time bank that doesn't have geographic limits. So that's kind of my vision of where we're headed. We're in transition. There's still a lot of direct exchanges. For the direct exchanges bit, something that's been true for the years is the abundance swap, which that's probably one of my favorite things. And
tell people if they've never heard of an abundance swap, what is it? Tell them what it looks like.
Yeah. So an abundance swap is based on the idea that we all have more than we know what to do with, and we'd like to get rid of a lot of it. So we kind of balance that with some education on decluttering. How can you declutter? I mean, some people are pack rats. I have veered in that direction from time to time. So if you get rid of things that you really don't want to have around the house, then instead of dumping them somewhere where you don't know where they're going to go, or having them go to the landfill, it's good to have an event in which everything is free. So we have a member in Oldsmar, Aaron Scott, who acquired an enormous white tent-like thing, which you've probably seen often, maybe with boats under it or whatever. Mm-hmm. So this last abundance swap was in my front yard, and he set up the tent. And then people brought things, and there were ways to hang. There were rods that clothing could be hung from, all under the tent, and then tables, and lots and lots of things came, and people came. So it was a way to socialize outside where it was safer. Right. And also people got things that they wanted, and they got rid of things they didn't want. And it was a chance to make time bank hours by donating and by helping.
And then, so if I come to an abundance swap, do I have to bring something in order to take something home?
Well, we don't push it. There were people in the neighborhood who were interested in what we were doing, and they'd be walking by and they'd say, well, what are you doing? And then they'd start looking, and they'd say, well, how much is this? And the answer is, well, it's free. And that just about caused a coronary. So they would go tell their friends and neighbors, hey, there's free stuff. And so we did get some people in the neighborhood who were pretty excited. One guy rode by on a bicycle right at the end as we were packing things up, and he was so excited. He got probably 2 or 3 bags of things.
That reminds me of an abundance swap at Moccasin Park, and there was a bicycle involved. Were you there for that one? Do you know that story?
That's Christina's story. I wasn't there for that one, but I remember that story.
I was there for that one. So maybe we'll wait and get Christina on here one time too. As a matter of fact, I thought of having the both of you on, but I just never got to where I asked her for it because this happened kind of quickly. But wow. So time banking aside, who is Rita? Who is Rita Cobbs?
So that's one of the things you do when you join the time bank is you fill out your profile, which involves a little biography. And there are people who just put down one sentence, they're taciturn. That's like, they've got one full sentence with 4 or 5 extra words in it, and that's it. And then other people write a book, goes on and on and on, paragraph after paragraph. So I guess I'm somewhere in between. There I am back again. And what came to my mind when I wrote it initially was that I like to start things. It takes energy to begin something new. It's creative. It's fun. So I've done a lot of that. The things when I look back at my life that amuse me the most and I'm, I guess, the most proud of. I started a library in our little town in Rural Retreat. It was a mountain little town. And it didn't have a library. It had a high school, but it had a McDonald's, but it didn't have a library. So we worked with the county and they said, oh, that's great. And then we got some local people who were willing to help. And by this time I learned it's better to be in the background than in the front of an idea. So some woman was willing to be president of the new organization. And pretty soon we had a $50,000 grant from the state of Virginia, which I don't know how that happened. I couldn't have done that by myself. And they bought, the library organization bought a pretty old house that was about 2 blocks from the high school on a residential street and converted it to make it handicapped accessible. And put a gazebo up in the yard, and the county staffed it. And so it's the most lovely little house. I talked to somebody yesterday from Withville who had gone to the library to get a book. And she said that the local woman who has an enormous house across the street was in there and asked about me. And so they chatted. And the woman had gotten some French onion soup that was made by the Mennonite people who started their own little restaurant. And she brought it back to the library for the staff member who was manning the little library.
Wow.
When I've gone in there, there have been 2 or 3 high school students doing things on the computer. There's a children's room, and they have a garage, and they have book sales. And it's just a pretty little library. I love it.
And this is how many years later?
I like starting.
How many years later is this now? How long ago did you start this?
Probably 15.
15
maybe
years
17.
ago in a rural town in Virginia? Wow.
Yes. Yeah,
Wow.
near Abington, about 100 miles north of Abington, south of Roanoke. But I can tell you, I know exactly. 9/11. 9/11 occurred when we were painting the inside of the library.
Okay.
We were painting walls, and somebody said, 9/11 had occurred, and so.
So that's how long ago it was. Wow, that's awesome. What else have you started?
So I started a hospice program in the same area in the mountains of Virginia, and that came because I had done hospice work in Citrus County. They had a regular hospice program, and I was doing grief counseling and social work. And when we moved to Virginia, at that point, my husband, Bill, was tired of Florida, and he wanted to go back to his home state, the mountains of Virginia. So
Gotcha.
that's what got us back there. And there were no hospices in the mountains.
Oh,
There
wow.
wasn't a single hospice program in about a 6-county area on both sides of the mountains. And it was just ridiculous. So a couple of people got together and we decided we were going to do it. And I was so blessed. I had volunteers from nursing who were on the staff of the community college, and had a volunteer medical director, and a pastor and a pastor's wife and 2 or 3 other people, and filled it out with the nurse who had been head of the hospital. It was a wonderful bunch of volunteers that formed the initial board to form it. And we went through Medicaid certification and Medicare certification, and continued. We made it for 4 counties. And
that is some incredible work.
Yeah, that's still there. I mean, that still exists. It is now part of the hospital. But the gal who I had hired straight out of college as a social worker became head of the hospice at one point after I left. So I've stayed in touch to see what they've been up to, and it's doing well.
Wow.
It has actually served people that I know who died. I mean, it was like, this really came full circle.
Because it was a small town and there was nobody there, and you thought it needed to be done, so you did it. Wow. That was cool, because when I read your bio, I mean, here we've known each other for, 6 years or so, and all I knew about you was the leadership team from Tampa Bay Timebank that I was involved with before I started, this over here in St. Pete, and didn't know any of this. And it's like, wow. I mean, we've had a few, private conversations that weren't Timebank related, but tell me about some of the travels that you did, because that's like high on my list now. With me
I know. So I envy you with your freedom now, because some of the happier days that my husband and I had together were in motorhomes. And I mean, even something as small as a VW van, if you can believe that, is good to travel in, and you can set it up as a camper. So we had one of those for a while. It looked, if I remember right, it looked like it was hand painted. It was not elegant, but it puttered along and it took us places. But the first time was shortly after we got together, and it was a converted Dodge van, which was the motorhome. Steel and sturdy and compact, but very functional. It had a little dining table that you could put down and make a place to sit, had a good bunk bed in the back, had refrigerator and a little stove, and 2 seats in the front. So you could do anything with that. And I think we even had a dog and traveled with a dog then.
Wow.
But there are so many campgrounds all over the United States, and so much fun to be had in just, I mean, it's not necessarily the greatest life of luxury, but it sure is more interesting than almost anything you can do.
I think you get the stuff that money can't buy when you travel like that.
I do too.
What do you have one area or one story or something that sticks out from your traveling days that you'd like to share?
So I guess it's kind of interesting that we combined earning money with doing this for a while. We had educational materials of a variety of sorts. And so we were able to merchandise educational materials through school boards in different parts of the United States. And we kind of had a route from Florida to Texas, so that we would find a park to spend the night in, someplace where we could camp, and then we'd call on the educational entities within that area, and then we'd go move somewhere else. So there are ways to have that kind of fun and make money too, when you're younger and you have connections and so on.
Yeah, so that was some of the fun. Go ahead.
I'll give you a horror story, a little
Oh,
horror
no.
story.
Okay.
No, it's just a little horror story. So,
Something to make
when
sure
you're
we talk
driving,
to, huh?
when you're driving anything, if it's larger, it's harder to handle. If it's medium size, you still have to pay attention. And there's a bridge, there's a tunnel on, I guess it's 19 from Florida to Texas. And I think it's Mobile, Alabama. But it says, how much clearance on the sign when you start to go through the tunnel. And it should have worked by what the sign said, but it didn't. And, you get that scraping noise as you're going under the tunnel. And, I thought the ceiling was falling, and I kind of remember hitting the floor. So there we were stuck. And I don't think it was our idea. Somebody said, well, maybe if you let the air out of your tires a bit, you'll be able to get through. And we did, and we made it through. And that was a shock.
In today's day and age with Facebook, I'm in, I don't know how many groups of different people that are traveling. And I've heard those stories before about, well, how do you know which road to go? Because, you got to know how high your rig is. And we went on a road and we couldn't make it. And those are just some scary stories, and I've seen, unfortunately, some really tragic ones to where, people have been harmed greatly. But, well, I'm kind of drawing a blank now, and we're about halfway through. It's only 7:30. So you've told us who Rita is. Oh, I wrote a little note here. How big is your leadership team, and what does that look like, and how do you govern yourselves?
Yeah, that's interesting. It was much more structured in earlier days than it is now. When I first met Marie, my focus was to have us become a nonprofit and get that done to expedite doing it. It was like, okay, let's get this going. We should have this done probably in the next 30 days. And so structure was something I really wanted to have happen. And Marie didn't think that decisions should be made by one or two people. Mm-hmm. She would always turn it back to the group for consideration. For the word co-production relates to some of this in many ways, but so it's not top-down decision making. Right. So you remember we would have gatherings of, 15, 20 people, and they were very pleasant gatherings, and ideas like that would be discussed. Well, by the time they've been discussed for a while, they somehow ended up on the bottom of the list of things to do. So we never got there. And I had the understanding that Chris and Edgar had been consulted about the pros and cons, and that there was fine assurance that we were operating just fine as an association, and we didn't need to go that route. So being as how they were more experienced in this than I was, I just was perfectly willing to go with that after a while and got used to it. And so then I haven't had any inclination now to go back to the more structured operation. The advantage of it, of course, is that you can solicit grants and you can become a real thing. If somebody says, who are you? That you then say, well, this is who I am, and I'm a nonprofit. And you can give me money if you'd like to. But once you get money, then you have to make sure that it's accounted for. So you get layers of responsibility with each movement forward into organizational structure. And we don't have any of that. And so at my age, I'm delighted not to have it. We have a little bit of money in the bank, and we don't spend any money. So that's about it. We have about 10 people who are engaged in leadership, sometimes more, sometimes less. We have a monthly meeting.
It's very fluid, isn't it? It's a very fluid engagement. Yeah, right.
Very fluid.
Not structural. Yeah.
What I want to do.
Go ahead.
What I want to do is to get some young people engaged in it. So if there is anyone listening to this who is willing to help us go forward and take some leadership role, you will be welcomed with great enthusiasm. And so why is that? Well, why it is most of us are older and technology is a challenge. And the changes in functioning in terms of technology are geometrically expanding. So, in a 30-minute or a 50-minute period, if you try to do something now, you have to relearn about 5 things, or you're confronted with a whole bunch of new stuff that you haven't ever seen before with each update. And for me, that's very hard to keep up with.
Right.
We have members who have no technology. We just admitted a lovely person who can't see very well. So that kind of rules out her ability to quickly do things on the computer. She can't see what's on the screen.
How does that work for a time bank?
So how it worked for getting her in the system was that we talked and I keyboarded.
Right.
And I explained all the different things and answered questions and basically did interview like we're doing and got as much information as I could. And then I would read back to her what I put in. But even the uploading of the photo, which is part of it, she said, yes, she could send me one by text. And so I was able to upload myself her photo that she sent.
And then don't you have kind of like I think it's called in the software that you use, an eBuddy? Somebody that could be her eyes on the internet and help her out with that, right?
Right. Yeah. I hope we can get a good eBuddy for her.
You mentioned a couple of names, and of course I know who they are, and a lot of people that will be watching this locally know who they are. But you said Chris and Edgar. Tell people who Chris and Edgar are.
So the book that Chris and Edgar wrote together, she was the editor for his book, is what started the Time Bank. Edgar Kahn has a background as attorney and created innovations with law in the Washington, D.C. area. And his experiences way back in those days formed the basis for a lot of his thinking about time banking. But he created the whole idea of time banking from his own experience. So one of the ideas that came out of it was the youth court. And you guys in St. Pete have a good youth program, so you might be able to speak more to that than I can. But the concept is wonderful in that instead of adults evaluating and making decisions about youthful offenders, a system was set up where young people served on the youth court and became the people who listened to the offenses and heard the accusations and the defenses, the statements of the offenders, and then would pass judgment on what would be an appropriate solution. And often they were pushed into doing some kind of community service to make reparations for whatever their offense was. And so the ones who were doing this, serving on the youth, then would get time bank credits.
Yeah, that was an incredible program. We don't have a youth court in St. Pete, but we do have a youth program. But yeah, I just wondered if just talk a little bit about Edgar and Chris because of his background, in social justice and the things that he has done for many, many years and literally created the time banking world for us so that we could do what we do and we have so much fun doing, So what is about, go ahead.
Oh, there are several interesting aspects to all of that always stay with me. First, Chris Gray created what to me is the image of what time banking is with her Venn diagram. And those of you who have forgotten your high school math may have forgotten what a Venn diagram is. But if you can imagine 3 circles that overlap in the center, that's the Venn diagram. And so she considers that time banking motivation and what keeps us engaged really is part and parcel of three different qualities or energies, and they all overlap. So for some people, all three of them contribute to what makes for time banking desire. We'll call it desire, contribution. So one is exchanges of a direct kind of service way. Let's say that you want somebody to mow your lawn, and somebody thinks that they like to mow lawns. I mean, I suppose there are people who like to do that. Or you may have somebody who is a great chef and is so excited about their traditional native dishes that they can't wait to prepare a dish for other people. And somebody else can't wait to have somebody cook for them. So there are exchanges of this sort in which there's a commodity involved usually, or a service. So those would be more or less transactional, and that would be one of the circles in the Venn diagram. Another is spiritual. Now, it may not be called spiritual. It could be almost anything that you call it, but it is ineffable, and it is what causes people to do things that benefit other people when they may not have any particular advantage for doing it. And they do it because that's what they're supposed to do, whether that's because God tells them to do that or because their nature is inclined in that direction. And that's what they think it is all about, to be a good human being. So we have now the transactional and the spiritual. And then the third is the relationships, which is where we started out, which is the many friends and acquaintances that you have when you get involved in time banking. And I think that I have made about 200 friends in time banking. Now, they may stretch from one, there's Spring Hill, which is a little distance away, has a bunch of them, and Gulfport has a bunch too. But this whole wide territory, which now appears to include Georgia and Somerville, Massachusetts, that is a really, really important part of time banking for me.
So with these three circles touching each other in the center, how does that play out? Is that where the
for some people there may not be any exchange of substantive services or materials at all that would be transactional. I mean, they may never ask for anybody to do anything in the way of cooking or yard work or fixing a car or repairing their buckle or whatever. There may never be any of those kinds of transactions, and they don't think of themselves as particularly spiritually minded, but they just want to have friends. And so their transactions are transactions of building a community of friends. But other people have a little bit of all of it mixed in
their
which I guess is true for me.
Something that baffles me about time banking, and I know you've been fully immersed in it for quite a few years, as I have, is like, why hasn't it gone mainstream? Why is this, you have 500 members or so in Tampa. We have 300 in St. Pete. There's under 100 or so in Spring Hill, correct?
I think so.
And it's like, I just don't understand why it hasn't gone kaboom. I thought that was going to happen at the beginning of COVID. I really did, because there's a lot of, the term escapes me. Well, there was a lot of people reaching out and helping neighbors and making sure that everybody was okay. And what's that word? Anyway, but time banking has just kind of been mediocre and not gone kaboom yet, and it's been going on since the 80s, or even Tony that you talked about in Ohio talks about the labor notes that were done in the 40s and how that really was a form of time banking, And so do you have any insight as to why it's not gone mainstream?
So some of it is going to be criticism of society, which I don't want to sound a negative note, but...
Do you need to grab a water?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Can you keep going while I go get
Oh,
some
I
water?
keep going. Okay. I'm gonna do a song and dance now
Yeah. Okay.
while Rita gets a bit of water. I saw her struggling with but that's something that I've often wondered about, because for me, time banking is that one of the comments here from a user was that there's a lot of people who are talk but not action, and that's correct. Maybe it's because time banking kind of it really encourages us to take action. But I've always wondered why doesn't it just explode? Why does it go absolutely absolutely crazy? The word I was trying to think of was mutual benefit society, mutual aid societies. A lot of those sprung up with COVID, to where neighbors were actually talking to other neighbors and helping neighbors out, and who needs, who's sick, who needs, a meal cooked for them, or who needs a ride or whatever, in these mutual aid societies. And a lot of them picked up and started with COVID. So I had thought at that point that maybe time banking would take off. And there's plenty, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of time banks all over the world. I know you, Rita, as well as myself, are involved with a time bank that is just for coordinators of time banks. And there's time banks in Korea, and time banks in Australia, and time banks in New Zealand, and now in Hawaii. Well, they have been in Hawaii, but they're going, really good in Hawaii. But it just always, I'm just like, how come it doesn't go mainstream? I think time bank first. When I need something done in my life, I'm like, how can I do this in the time bank? And it's as simple as, I'm out of town. I need something, somebody offers a good, or, something of substance that I want, and I'm not going to be back in town for 3 weeks. Do you mind holding it for me? And they say yes. And then, or I get a time bank member. One month I had 4 or 5 time bank members pick up things for me because I was traveling. And then when I came back into town, I was able to do all those exchanges all at once. But it's been then often been something that I'm like, why doesn't this just go kaboom? Another Facebook user says they flit from one interest to another. And maybe that's it. Maybe people don't have a solid commitment, and it's hard to stick with one idea, or it sounds good for a while, and then it fades away. But that's just something that's on my brain often, is like, how come this is the best thing since sliced bread, if you ask me. I mean, I can share what I love to do with people who need or want what that is, and I get a credit in my bank that I can use for whatever I want that's offered by another member. It's like, hello, that is not a difficult thing to understand, and why don't more people want it? So maybe too in-depth of a question for the small time that we have here. But so where do you see Tampa Bay Time Bank going in the future? I know you said you kind of see it going more in a Zoom and more about learning.
I think so. There are just so many things that we like to learn. At one point, we had a delightful discussion group about art, and it started with on photography, discussions of that book, and then it moved into various books related to art, and then some of the videos on art. So we would pick a book or a chapter in a book, and then examine that artist and read that chapter, and then get together and just sort of share opinions. Usually one person chaired the meeting and picked the artist. But I was telling you earlier that somebody named Becky was part of that group, and that she has gifts in making films. So she added a special element because she brought with her presence a knowledge of filmmaking. And just in something like this, she had a studio set up just for a Zoom that looked so professional. So we marveled at her point of view. And then we have somebody named Tish, who's been in the time bank for a very long time.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah. Tish is an artist. She's also a marketer. She knows marketing, and she's also now devoted to yoga instruction in her own home. Mm-hmm. So with 3 wonderful parts to her life, at least, 6 or 7 more, she has the community garden for Seminole Heights too, and she has that on her own property. So
Nice.
it seems like we cluster people who are interested in growing things, who are interested in intellectual pursuits, who like having fun and talking with each other, and who care about community building. So I think this next year we're going to be doing more with the refugees. That has crossed the bay now, and what was Romway, um, Refugee and Migrant Women's Initiative, run by Florence Aki, has merged with So Much Hope, which is on your side of the bay, and it works to provide refugee women with better opportunities as they get used to being in the United States. The husbands get jobs and the kids go to school, but the women are often left alone trying to figure out how to navigate a strange society. So this organization fills the gap. We did a lot with them this year. We had a lot of fun with them, and I think we'll do more this year.
Cool. So we have about 4 minutes left. I did want to have you mention again about your third Tuesday. Do I have to be a Time Bank member to come to this event?
No, you don't. We just have to know we need to send you a link. We don't just publish it everywhere. But if you want to call up the Tampa Bay Timebank with its website, we'll be happy to get in touch with you. And it doesn't cost anything to join the Timebank. So I guess my thought would be you don't have anything to lose by joining the Timebank. And you'll get information like that, and you'll get part of a whole new community. And we'll be happy to bring you into that community and share your talents and provide our own.
I'm typing here because somebody had a question about what was the name of the refugee organization. It is Romway Refugee and Migrant Women's Initiative, right?
That's right. And you can find that.
Find them on Facebook. Right.
And they have a website.
So
and they're wonderful.
Oh yeah, they're great people. I was gonna pull, but I can't pull it off of where it's at right now from where I'm sitting. But I have a little wristlet that the women made, and I love it. It's just a small little thing when I want to. Today when I went to go meet somebody in Gulfport, I just put my phone and my card and my driver's license in there and walked off, and it's a beautiful print. So we are just about ready to log off. I wanted to make sure that people knew that the website for Tampa Bay Time is tampabaytime.org, and you can reach them there, and they will be advertised there, or you can question them there on how to get on that Zoom. If you're a Time Bank member anywhere, St. Pete, Spring Hill, Tampa, anywhere at all, or if you're listening in different parts of the country, you can be involved and earn time credits for going and participating. So Rita, as usual, it's been lovely to talk with you. I miss our getting together and having meals in our little regional meetings that we were doing there for a little while, and getting together physically. But that's just not part of what's going on in the world right now. So we stay safe and do things like this. I truly appreciate you coming in as my plan B. We had another speaker scheduled, and there were some things beyond our control that happened where they couldn't come, and I'm like, I know Rita would love to be here with me. So thank you.
Well, it's been fun. The hour has gone very quickly.
It has gone pretty quickly. I saw in a little hot second in the square in the bottom of your screen, I saw Lacey. I saw her color go by. Yeah, so I thought it was cute.
She's on the couch now.
Beautiful story about time banking and a dog. So we're getting ready to sign off. We thank everybody for watching. This is hosted monthly by St. Pete Timebank. And to find out more about St. Pete Timebank, you can go to https stpetetimebank.org. And we have a little bit there, public-facing website to show what time banking is. We also share a time bank website with Spring Hill and Tampa, and that is floridatimebanks.org. And so you can get to all the time banks from there. So thank you, Rita, so much. Stand by. We'll be in the studio in the back room here as soon as I sign off. And I want to thank everybody for watching and for your questions. And contact either one of us through St. Pete Timebank or Tampa Bay Timebank to find out more. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.